Okay, so it's great to see you on this wonderful Tuesday, which is we are upcoming, we are coming up, I should say, to the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, and there's never a better time to get closer and ready for Rosh Hashanah than now, because it's coming near, and it's time to wake up and smell the coffee before the holiday comes. And along that path, it's great to be studying Tanya because Tanya helps us in our spiritual and divine service. And one of the main ideas of Rosh Hashanah is, of course, to better ourselves and to think of ways to connect more with God. And what better way than to study the Tanya as we discover the inner world and the meaning behind it, the many things that we do. And that helps give us inspiration and connection and all the things that we need to do. Yes, one second. Okay. So we started off on a journey, chapter 23. Well, I should back up. We started off on a journey discovering how all the commandments really will connect us with God. That's really what we're trying to get to. We're trying to show how all the commandments are included. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods. And basically what we're trying to get to is that every commandment connects you with God, and every sin disconnects you from God. In other words, as opposed to the general thought and feeling that people have that commandments are just what God wants of us, right? So obviously that's a very basic level, but what does a commandment actually do, right? Okay, yes, of course they are what God wants of us, but on a deeper level, we're saying a commandment, more than just it's being the will of God, it connects you with God. I'm sure you've heard this many times. A mitzvah is connection. And we've been exploring that idea that a mitzvah is a connection in a very deep way. We described it like being the limbs of a body, just as the limbs of a body are very much connected with the will of the person, because the moment you desire something, your limbs move. There's no separation over there because the soul is very much connected with the body. So to God and his will are one. And when you do a mitzvah, you are connected with God's will, which is, of course, a beautiful thing. Then we pivoted to get to Torah. How Torah takes all of this a step further. As Torah is not just fulfilling the will of God, but Torah is the will of God itself. Good to see you, Rabbi. And that is going to be our discussion today. That Torah is not just fulfilling the will of God, but is actually the will of God. Which is why, by the way, it's worth studying Torah, even in things and elements that are not quote unquote practical. Just give you an example. Yesterday I was studying the laws of the Paschal sacrifice that would be brought in the temple. And in the book of Maimonides. And Maimonides starts off discussing in one chapter that the rule is, if generally you're not allowed to bring the Passover sacrifice if you're impure, but if most of the Jewish people are impure, then they should bring the sacrifice, and even though they're impure. Then Maimonides goes in a whole bunch of hypotheticals. What if it's 50-50? And how do we count the 50-50? Do you include children in the 50-50? Do not include children in the 50-50? What if you have a third of people are impure in one type of impurity, a third of people are impure with another type of impurity, and a third of the people are not impure at all? He went to a bunch of hypotheticals that I would venture to guess that most of them never happened. But yet I enjoyed reading this because I understood that it's not so important whether the scenario ever happens. It's a fascinating exploration of what is the will of God, because the will of God is that in this scenario, this is what should happen. It doesn't make a difference whether it happens or not. That's the will of God. See, we tend to connect will with things that can actually happen, right? In other words, otherwise we call somebody a dreamer, right? So if I, so to speak, I would love to have $1 billion, and what I would do with $1 billion, it doesn't interest you what I would do with $1 billion, because I'm not going to get $1 billion, right? So we tend to think that will is really only important and desire is only really worth exploring if it's something that's practical. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that that feeling is wrong or right. I'm just saying how most people relate. But when it comes to God, God's will is how he thinks. That's what he desires. And so automatically, if you can explore that, you are connecting with him at a most deep level. You are thinking how he thinks. You're processing how he processes, as crazy as that sounds. But that's really the whole beauty of Torah study. Torah study is all a study of, or I shouldn't say all of it, but a lot of it is a study of what is God's will. This is why when people read the Talmud and they get all bamboozled about all the hypotheticals and all the tangents, but if you look at it with this lens, with these glasses, the Torah is putting out all these hypotheticals because we want to go as far as we can in all the hypotheticals. We want to know what is possibly the will of God. What would God say in this case? And that's exciting to us. That's important to us. We want to know what his will is. We want to know what he would desire. I don't know if there's an example of a human being that you have the same exact idea, but very good. Nina's saying, making a good point, right? Mitzvos are like trying to please God, and Torah is thinking like God. That's very beautiful, very beautiful. And so therefore it's important, even if what I'm studying about is not something I'm ever going to do, it's a powerful thing to think because we are thinking like God, not just trying to please him. We're going to explore further today about Torah, and that is really today's thoughts. And I want to say that when we study the Torah and we start to think like God, we start to live in a different reality. Just to preface it with a story. The story is that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, was it Alter Rebbe? No. Sorry, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe. He had followers, Hasidim, in the city of Odessa in Ukraine. And one day he had one of his Hasidim, he had two Hasidim from Ukraine come to visit him. And one of them came to him and he asked him what's going on in Odessa. And his friend told him, Odessa, it's wonderful. There's Torah classes, there's prayers, there's minyan. It's a wonderful place to live. Great things are happening. And so the Rebbe gave him 10 rubles. Well, then he came out and he told his second friend from Odessa, what happened. And the second guy from Odessa then came into the Rebbe's office, the fifth Chabad Rebbe. The Rebbe asks him, how's Odessa? And he's like, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to be realistic. And he starts to tell him, we can barely get people to come to shul, and we do these Torah classes, but not so many people show up. And the observance of mitzvahs, we need to get people more involved in it, and painting with this very negative outlook. So the Rebbe gave him 1 ruble. She gave him 10%. So he tells the Rebbe, he says, I don't understand. To the guy who lied, you gave him 10 rubles. To me, I tell the truth, you give me 1 ruble. How's that fair? So the fifth Chabad Rebbe told him, listen, I don't need either of you to tell me what's going on in Odessa. I know very well what's going on in Odessa. I know better than both of you what's going on in Odessa. I mean, think about it. It's a Rebbe, a holy person, and he has lots of followers. He knows what's going on. The Rebbe told him, I didn't want to find out what's going on in Odessa. I wanted to find out which Odessa you live in. That's what I was trying to find. I was trying to find out what Odessa that you live in. In other words, there's 2 Odessas, and there's 2 Pinellas counties, and there's 2 Palm Harbors. I hear it all the time, right? When people want to describe what's going on at Chabad, I can meet 2 people, and they can have 2 totally different outlooks. And they're not wrong, and they're not right. It's the reality that we choose to live in. There's the world we inhabit. There's different ways to look at the world, and they're not wrong and they're not right. We can be living in the same place, and we can be seeing the same things, and we can be interpreting them in many, many different ways. And it's up to us what colored glasses we're going to wear when we interact with the world. And this, my friends, is the additional great value of the Torah. In other words, the mitzvahs are beautiful. They allow us to connect with the will of God. But only the Torah allows us to connect with God the way he thinks, in a way that's not hidden. Because when we do a mitzvah, at the end of the day, we are interacting with a physical object, and God's will is still more hidden because it's enclosed in a physical object. When you study Torah, you are studying God's will itself. You become merged with God in a much greater level. We gave examples last week. We said, even though the body and the soul unite, which is the example that we give for how we unite with God when we do a mitzvah, nevertheless, the soul and the body are separate entities. And the unity we get with God when we study Torah is the most wonderful unity that we can get. And when we get to that level of unity, we uplift ourselves to a place where God is not so hidden, where we can sense, feel, appreciate God all around us. And so aside from, studying Torah being a mitzvah, what I'm trying to tell you is that when you study Torah, you look at the world differently. That's a personal benefit that you could take with you. You should come out of a Torah class recognizing that there's godliness everywhere, that's the truth of the world, and the challenges of the world seem less daunting. That's what Torah study should do for you. So let us take a look at some text here, and then we'll continue discussing this topic. So here he's going to describe how when you study Torah, you become united with God in a wondrous way in which God is not hidden at all. So it sounds like this. Now, since the divine will that is merged in total union with the blessed infinite one is fully disclosed in the divine, so without any hiding of face at all. In other words, right, God creates this world, and from God's perspective, everything is connected with God. But from our perspective, God is hidden. But when you study the Torah, you are fully connected with God. There's no hiding of God. You're fully connected with God's will. At that moment, when you're involved with the Torah text, which engages your divine soul's inner garments, it's thought and speech. Remember, the divine soul has three garments: thought, speech, and action. So when you study Torah, you are involving your inner garments, which is your thought. So again, not only are you connecting to God in a way that there's nothing hidden, but you are connecting with your inner garments. It follows that your soul and its garments too are totally merged with the blessed infinite one at that moment. In chapter 5, we learn that Torah represents a phenomenal merging experience of two being. There's no merging experience like it. What then is added in chapter 23? I don't think we did this last week. Okay, what then is added in chapter 23 by stating that the soul and her garments too are merged with the blessed infinite one at that moment of study. So again, in chapter 5, we said that it's a phenomenal merging experience. What do we add by saying that the garments are also merged? The key innovation here is that Torah represents a disclosure of the divine will without any hiding of face at all. That's the most important thing that we're adding here. Not only you merge with God, but you're merging with God in a way that God is not hidden. The Tanya draws on a non-dual paradigm introduced in chapter 20 to 22, which we were not yet familiar with in chapter 5. In the non-dual understanding of the universe, our goal is not to bridge the gap separating God from the universe. Rather, we try to come to the realization that there is no gap in the first place, even though our senses perceive a universe separate from God. And that is only real from the perspective of God's diminishment, a hiding of face. If we are able to transcend the limited vision, we come to a higher level of consciousness. There's been no diminishment at all, right? So just to harken back to one of our examples, when I'm trying to explain to a young child a concept, I have to use very simple language. And to them, my full intent is hidden, right? because they cannot see it all. But from my perspective, I fully grasp what I'm trying to give to them, and I know the topic well. But so in essence, God is not hidden, but to the child, in essence, my thoughts are not hidden, but to the child, it's very hidden because the child doesn't fully grasp and understand what I'm saying. The same thing it says when God creates the world. God, from his perspective, is not hidden, but from our perspective, he is hidden. And so what we're adding in this chapter is when you study Torah, not only do you merge with God in a beautiful way, but you're merging with God in a way that God is not hidden. Let's continue. That's, by the way, why it says Torah is compared to water. It says just as water. It's the same water that you have on top of the waterfall, the bottom of the waterfall. It's the same Torah. God's Torah in heaven and God's Torah on earth is the same Torah. Maybe the technical words are different, but it's the same will and wisdom of God. Let's continue. Our chapter then adds that even if we have not yet reached this higher consciousness through meditation, it is a reality which has been implanted into the Torah. The Torah and God are totally one, says the Zohar, because the Torah represents the pure wisdom and will of God, devoid of any diminishments, a place where there's no hiding of the face. So, what he's saying here is you might say, what do you mean when I study Torah, I can see God? When I study Torah, I don't see God. When I study Torah, I'm studying about when a cow gores another cow. But what he's answering here is that this is what Torah is. Torah is the will of God. So even though it's talking about cows or whatever else it's talking about, this is indeed the will of God, and there's no separation from God. You may choose not to feel it, but our sages tell us that eventually the Torah will affect you. It will have an effect on you. Let's continue. With this in mind, we can appreciate the subtle yet significant shift in the perception from chapter 5 to chapter 23. In chapter 5, God and man are two separate entities that come together in a phenomenal merging experience. But in chapter 23, the human mind merges with a Torah level of consciousness where there's been no hiding a face, where there was never a separate existence of God in the first place. I know many people struggle with the concept of studying Torah. Not everybody. Some people like to do mitzvahs. They love the mitzvot. The study of Torah, they find the minutia and the details. They find it, I don't want to say annoying, but they just like, why drive ourselves crazy? This is what the Tanya is trying to present to you, that you have an opportunity to connect with God in a way that you don't have with mitzvahs. You can not only do the will of God, but think how he thinks. But let's continue. As we mentioned above, the God's thought and speech are totally one with his blessed essence itself. So when your thought and speech are merged with Torah, your faculties achieve the same level of union. I'm going to skip because he's just repeating. Okay. Let's not skip, but just continue. The Tanya argues here with God's speech in Torah. God's infinite formless essence is one with the text form of the Torah. So when your thought and speech are engaged in the Torah, at that moment, they are totally merged with God. Because nothing becomes separate from God unless there's a hiding of face, as mentioned above. Torah was never separate from God, as it did not suffer from the hiding of God's face. Therefore, it does not need to be reunited with him. When we study Torah, we merge our thought and speech in an overtly non-dual energy and absorb it. That's a powerful thought. If something is separate from God, that is because God had to hide himself. If God does not actively hide himself, then it's not separate automatically. So everything in this world, everything in this world has experienced God hiding himself, except for the Torah. The Torah is the only place where God has not hidden himself. When you think about it, it's true. How could it be hiding anything? It's God's will. The Torah is literally God's will, what God wants. If it's what he wants, if it's his desire, then there's nothing hidden. There's nothing separate. The practical reality is there's nothing separate. It is just him. It's just God. And what's beautiful about this is that no matter how much you understand of the Torah, whatever level you are, whatever you do understand, you are connecting with his will. You don't have to be an Einstein, right? You don't have to be a tzaddik. You don't have to be the most righteous person. That's the koach. That's the power of the Torah. That the Torah allows us to connect with God in a way that transcends our usual limitations of being a human being, our usual limitations of lack of connectedness. And here, we talk about by a mitzvah, you want to feel connected with God. Here, again, if it's the will of God, the moment you study it, the moment you understand it, you are connected with Him. But here I want to ask, here the Tanya is going to ask a very, very simple question. And it goes like this. So it sounds like the Torah is just a cheat code for me to connect with God because we're in this world which is not so connected with God. So is there any benefit to Torah when we go to heaven? In other words, I would think in heaven when God's not so hidden, wouldn't I not need the Torah? Wouldn't I have no trouble connecting with God? What do you think?
No, I think that what we're doing here is preparing us to go to heaven, isn't it?
So here I want to differentiate between Torah and mitzvot. Well, I think we all understand that there's no such thing as mitzvot in heaven, right? You cannot do a mitzvah in heaven because there's no free will, right? So we can all appreciate that mitzvot are needed on this earth, and they can only be done here on this earth, right? The question I'm asking is the study of Torah. Is the study of Torah necessary in a higher spiritual world where God is not so hidden? And I might add, do they study Torah in heaven? Is there a need?
I don't think it's a need. I think it's the way that the Torah is kind of what in the beginning what you were talking about. It's about being good, I guess, is what you were talking about. I mean, God was saying that we will, make mistakes and we will do this. This is why we have so many laws of what not to do. Okay. And if we don't do that, Moses said in the last week's Torah portion,
right,
what the consequences of that will be. Okay. So there are consequences and you could, or you couldn't, you don't have to, it's a matter of choice. And as his chosen people, we should choose always God's will.
Right, but that is all related to mitzvahs. My question is about Torah.
Yeah, well, I think that there's
Torah, in other words, Torah study. Is there something unique about? Okay, let me ask my question differently. We know there's something unique about doing mitzvot here on this earth, right? Doesn't exist in any spiritual world. Cannot exist because they have no free will. Precisely because God is not hidden in the heavenly realms. But with that same token, I can say, okay, I get it, I need Torah on this earth, but is Torah really important in heaven where God is not hidden? In other words, that's the question.
Yeah, and so the bottom line is I don't think that we know. I think that whatever we're supposed to know is given to us in the Torah, which has been, I guess, guided to us by our leaders. It's an interpretation. We're supposed to look for the clues. That's why we study. I don't think that we know. It is hidden, as you said.
So
can I say something?
Yeah.
I think that it's very clear that there's Torah in heaven for me, because there's two things. First of all, there's Judgment Day, and that is Torah. And then God says, or actually, I don't know where that comes from, really pointing where, but all along, I've known that whatever happens on earth is happening in heaven. So whatever that is, as the way that God wants it to be. So for those two reasons, I feel that Torah is in heaven too. That's
Okay.
all.
All right, so I'm going to tell you a couple stories that tells us that the Torah that we study here is somehow greater than Torah in heaven. Right? Again, the reason why I'm saying this is because, again, philosophically, we understand automatically mitzvos are more powerful in this world. In fact, there are no mitzvahs in the heavenly realm because there's no free will. So let me just tell you a couple of stories. Number one, the Talmud tells us that when Moses went to heaven to receive the Torah, the angels told God, it's not fair. Don't give it to him. Leave it with us. In other words, even to the angels felt the Torah was special to the point where they wanted to keep it. And they didn't want to let it go down to earth. So we understand there is something special in the Torah. And somehow when it's given to us, it sounds like we have something better than they have. So that's story number one. Story number two, the Talmud tells that there was once an argument between some great rabbis, and one of the rabbis was pulling off miracles. He says, if I'm right, let this stream run backwards, and the stream ran backwards. He says, if I'm right, let the wall start to fall, and the wall started to fall. And he says, if I'm right, let heavens agree with me. And a voice booms out and says that the rabbi was right. And the other rabbi says, we don't care. Torah lo b'shamayim. The Torah is not in heaven. We get to decide what the Torah is down here. And a couple of days later, it says that one of the rabbis met Elijah the prophet. And Elijah the prophet told them that at that time God was very happy. And he said, my children, you've won. That's story number two. So we see from here that we can override the heavenly court. I don't know if you want to say it's God, but the heavenly court, wherever the angels are. And the third story is also in the Talmud that whatever. Anyways, the point is that there are all these fascinating stories. Also, we are also told that when our souls go to heaven, we do study Torah. In fact, we can only study the Torah that we studied here on earth. So what we gather from all of this is, number one, there is Torah in heaven, that our souls study Torah in heaven, but yet something changed. When the Torah was given to us, when the Torah was given to us, we gained something. Somehow the Torah being here on earth is greater than the Torah in heaven. It's strange, right? So we're going to read the section and then we'll try and explain it.
Yeah, okay.
This section is going to tell us that the Torah on this earth reveals God more than the Torah in heaven. Sounds strange. How could there be any difference? So let's read. Section 3, the earthly Torah and the heavenly Torah. The highest of the spiritual... by the way, all of this is not a theoretical... You might say, Rabbi, who cares? Why are we splitting hairs if it's better here or better there? The answer is, of course, as I've been saying, this is all to help you... The Tanya is all to help you appreciate what you're doing. The Tanya is here to help you understand the spiritual content. Torah, mitzvot, the beauty behind it all. This is what the Torah is coming here to do. So let us read it here. So let's say like this. The highest of the spiritual worlds is characterized by a transparency to divine, does not suffer from the hiding of God's face. The Tanya now addresses the question, what contains a higher disclosure of God? The higher spiritual world or the Torah as it is manifest or the Torah as it is manifest here in the lower world? Right? So which one is better? So he says like this. He says, furthermore, the merging of the divine soul in his garments of speech and thought with God is with more dignity and more power than the merging of the blessed infinite light with even the uppermost spiritual transparent worlds. It's a powerful statement, my friends. The merging of the divine soul with God is with more dignity and more power. The word dignity is an interesting translation. I don't know why I use the word dignity, but let's just say power, is with more power than the merging of the infinite light with the upper worlds. So when you study Torah, you are merged with more powerful light than the higher worlds are merged with God. So he says like this: if the Torah and the spiritual worlds are both compatible with the infinite light, why should Torah represent a greater disclosure? In other words, here we live in a physical world where there's no revelation of God. We need the Torah to give us a revelation of God. But in heaven, they should always be one with God. So he says like this: because when the divine soul and its garments are immersed in the Torah, the divine will is fully disclosed in them. Why? Since, as we have explained above, page 264, the Torah itself is a divine will, and that is what is absorbed in the person's mind. So again, when you study Torah, you are absorbed with the divine will itself. Whereas the upper worlds only receive their life energy from the light and life energy that is drawn out from the Torah. The Medrash says, God looked in the Torah and created the world. The Torah is like the blueprint of the world. It says this in other places. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. Just as with your blueprint of your home, and we spoke about this last time, the blueprint is actually your will. The home is the execution of your will, but it is not your will itself. The same thing we're saying here. The Torah is God's will itself. So when you study Torah, you are studying God's will itself, which is the source of what creates the upper world. So the upper worlds have the divine light, but that divine light was sourced in God's will. In other words, let's put it in more simple terms, God desired that higher world. So the desire for that higher world is the Torah, and the world itself is a beautiful world, but it is not the will itself. It is what's been created from God's will. And as spiritual as it is a step lower than the will itself, because the will itself is what creates it, right? So God wants to create the worlds. Part of his desire to create the worlds is higher worlds and lower worlds. Even though the higher worlds do not experience a hiding of God's face like we do here, but nevertheless, they're automatically a step lower from the will of God. Because again, will of God, then the actualization of God's will. The world is the actualization of God's will. But God's will itself will be higher than that, more connected with God himself. So when you study Torah, you're connected with God's will himself. I didn't explain yet why our Torah here is better than the Torah they studied there, but right now you get the point that Torah itself is higher than the spiritual worlds, because the Torah is the source of the spiritual world. Let's read this over here. God used the energy of the Torah to create the worlds. The worlds only exist for the sake of the Torah, so the light and energy present in the world is secondary. It is for the sake of the Torah. Even if the upper worlds are fully transparent to the energy that creates them, they only contain secondary energy and not primary energy, the type that enters your mind when you study Torah itself. So again, your mind, when you study Torah, is full of the primary energy that is creating the world, which is the secondary energy, it's the actualization of God's will, but it is not the will itself. The Tanya now cites the proof that the Torah energy creates the world. By the way, think about that. Think about Torah is what creates the world. How powerful of a thought is that? How important is that thought? The Torah creates the world itself. So let's continue. Since the Torah, which is his will and chokhmah, was the energy through which the world was created, as the verse states, you made them all with chokhmah. You made them all with wisdom. So whatever, it's not important to get to the proofs. So it follows that God's chokhmah, God's wisdom, which is the Torah, is higher than the world since it caused them. I always said the Tanya is written for the scholar and the layman. So he's bringing scholarly proofs from verses that the Torah is what creates the world. And he quotes from this verse in Psalms. I'm not going to delve into it because it's not important. Okay? Unless you want to be the scholar and figure out his proofs. But now we got the point. The Torah is God's will. It's God's will to create the worlds, even the higher worlds. So automatically, anything that's created from the Torah is going to be God's secondary. Is going to be a secondary energy to God's will itself. The Tanya now takes the argument a stage further, suggesting that to say that the divine will is higher than the worlds is an understatement. An understatement. So let's read this. And this Chochmah, the Torah, is in fact the will of God, which is called Sovev Kol Alman by the Zohar. Anybody here studied ever a little bit of Kabbalah, Kabbalistic ideas? Familiar with Sovev Kol Alman? Anybody? Nobody's. I think we've discussed it. We discussed it a long, long time ago. Sovev Kol Alman and Mamale Kol Alman. They are oft quoted in Hasidic philosophy. They're very important divine energies. So he gives a shorthand version of explaining what it is. We'll read it and then we'll explain it because this is an important thought. In the Kabbalah, the term Sovev Kol Alman, literally encircles all the worlds, is used to refer to a light and energy that is incompatible with the created worlds. The light of Sovev is too intense to engage with the worlds and become enmeshed with them, so as to provide energy to them. Therefore, Sovev Kol Alman light metaphorically encircles the world, meaning that it cannot occupy the same metaphysical space as the world due to its fundamental incompatibility. So basically, God has two different powerful lights. God has a Sovev Kol Alman light that's a all-encompassing powerful light, but it's too powerful to actually have detailed effects on the details of the world because it would blast them into smithereens. It's like and it's like an energy that's just too powerful that cannot be adapted. Okay, it cannot be adapted to the details and the specifics of the world. But then there are elements of energy that can be adapted into the specifics and details. The example we give is we have in our lives, our bodies have a general life force. There's the fact that we're alive. And then there's the detailed abilities of each limb. And both of those are spiritual and divine energies coming from God. So for example, someone can have, God forbid, a hand that doesn't work, but it's still alive, right? So there are these two different energies, soul, we call them soul energies. I don't know the science, but I'm telling you from the divine perspective, how we look at it, is that there's the energy of your soul that's more general. It's the general life. And that's why you can have a limb that's alive, but doesn't work. Then you have the energy that can be specific, the one that goes into the eye to help you see. Because when you see, it's not just your physical eyes seeing, your soul is seeing. And you have the energy that can make your hands move. You have energy that can make you hear. All these different energies, there are two different energies. Now, which energy is greater? The greater energy is the general life force. It's a more powerful energy, though it's not tailor-made, but it's more powerful. In general, anything that's tailor-made is going to be diminished because in order for something to be tailor-made, it has to fit the exact limitations of the item that it is going into. Okay? That's really what we do in general, right? In your homes, you have electricity, and then you have wires and outlets that harness the electricity and minimize it so that it can be helpful for a specific appliance, right? But that's all diminishing. You have to be able to take away from the general power and diminish and define it. So, of course, without defining anything, things won't work. But at the same time, we have to appreciate that it is diminishing in order to define and create. So what he's going to make the argument here is that the Torah is this more powerful light. How do we say that? Because again, it's the source of everything, but it's not actually the items themselves. So it's not limited to being detailed. It's the more powerful energy before the world is created. So let's read this. Let's read this text here. All right. Sovev Kol Alman, this more surround sound power, the more larger power, refers to the type of divine light and energy which is unable to become enmeshed with the world due to the light's intensity, and only provides energy and light to the worlds indirectly and distantly from above in a disengaged fashion. Disengaged meaning not that it's not giving it energy, but it's not in a detailed, specific way. My example of the soul. There's the general life force that you're alive, and then there's the detailed energies of the specific ideas. And by the way, you can get from this that this is how the Torah can shine in this world. Because the Torah is so powerful that it doesn't enmesh with this world, at the same time, that means it can also appear in different places. In other words, an energy that's tailor-made for a higher spiritual world cannot shine here because it doesn't fit. It's a tailored type of energy can only fit where it's tailored to. But a non-tailored energy, like the Torah, the same way it can shine in heaven, it can shine here on earth because it's not tailor-made. Whatever limitations it has to shine in any specific world applies everywhere equally. The same way it doesn't enmesh with the spiritual world, it doesn't enmesh with the physical world. But the same way you can access it there, you can access it here. That's why it doesn't diminish. The Torah does not diminish wherever you take it, because it's not a tailored type of energy. So let me read this over here. Even though the Soviv light is generally incompatible with the worlds, some of its energy nevertheless does seep through them. In fact, this is no small matter, as it is the Soviv energy that ultimately powers the creation of the worlds, as I mentioned in my example of the soul, through various filters and other processes. But due to its uncontainable character, the Soviv light cannot interact directly with the worlds, and instead influences them from a distance, hence its name, encircles the world Soviv Kolaman. Yet this incompatible Soviv light is precisely what does become absorbed by and fully disclosed in the soul and its garments of thought and speech at the time of Torah study. That is the miracle of Torah text. It offers a full disclosure of a divine light and energy so powerful that it cannot be contained by the world. Yet that light and energy has been contained and made available to us in the sacred text of the Torah. So you might tell me, Rabbi, that's all good and fine, but how am I actually able to access it? So here he says, you actually are able to access it precisely because you don't feel it. That's going to be his answer. In other words, the reason why a non-tailored energy cannot vivify, cannot enter, cannot become enmeshed with certain places is because when they feel it, they, so to speak, blow to smithereens. Right? If the refrigerator were to get all the energy that comes from a lightning strike and it'll feel it, it'll go kaboom. But if somehow the energy of the lightning could enter the refrigerator without the refrigerator feeling it, then it could handle it because it's not blowing up. It's not able to handle it because it's there without feeling it. So this is what we're going to explain, that in fact, our great benefit and the reason why we can actually handle the Torah's great light is precisely because we don't fully see it and we don't fully feel it. In the spiritual world, if they were to get the level of Torah that we get, it would blow to smithereens because they're an internalized world. They internalize everything. We don't feel spirituality. We don't internalize the spirituality. We don't connect with it. So, I mean, we connect with it, but not to a very high level. And so, oddly enough, it's our downside, if you want to call it, is our upside. Because spirituality is so hard to feel in this world and so hard to sense, therefore we can handle more of it. It doesn't make sense. It's a miracle of God. The Tanya says elsewhere, I don't think he says it here on this page. Maybe he does, but I know the Tanya elsewhere says that it says in a lot of places about Torah, the Torah is strength. God gives us strength when he gives us the Torah. And what that means is that he gives us an ability to do something that doesn't make any sense. To connect with his great divine light and yet remain who we are and not fully feel it, but yet connect with that great divine light. Rick, you had something you wanted to say?
No, I was trying to have my video on, breaking up, but it didn't work.
I saw it for a moment. Okay, I saw it for a moment.
Yeah, no, Yeah, I'm better off without video for freeze ups and stuff. My internet's not great when I'm sitting.
Got it. Okay. So, by the way, based on what we said till now, you can understand an important idea that I don't know if he's going to explain this here. Yeah, he's going to explain that. Really, in essence, Torah is greater than mitzvos. If, for example, you were a person that would study Torah all day, you would be exempt from mitzvos. None of us are, but everybody's familiar with the author of the Torah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was in a cave for 13 years. He didn't do any mitzvahs. He studied Torah all day. Our sages say he was exempt from doing mitzvahs. We have to do mitzvahs because we take breaks from our Torah study anyway. So since we're anyways taking a break to eat lunch, I don't know, whatever. I know lunch is not a good example. Whatever we take breaks for, therefore we need to study. We need to do mitzvahs. But in theory, the power of Torah is so powerful that if someone was able to study Torah the entire day without any breaks, ever wasting any time, they would actually be exempt from mitzvahs. That's an interesting point, just showing you how powerful the Torah is. But let me read this text here again about how even though this Torah text is so powerful and has this surround sound power, the power that cannot be tailored, nevertheless we can handle it. So he says like this. This is the miracle of Torah text. It offers full disclosure of divine light and energy so powerful that it cannot be contained by the world, and yet that light and energy has been contained and made available to us in the sacred letters of the Torah. Why then do our souls simply not expire when we read a Torah text? If you're dealing with such a powerful energy, it should be like a lightning hitting you. You should fall apart. So he says like this, even though they did not see the vision, their mazalot saw it. So this text is referring to a story, I believe in the book of Daniel, that it says in the book of Daniel that God appeared to Daniel, the prophet Daniel, and everybody around him was scared. Now, the people around him did not see God. Only Daniel saw God. But it says even though they did not see God, they could sense God. So they had a fear without the actual real ability to see God. That's the same idea that we have, is that when we study the Torah, although we will not get the full disclosure of what's happening, we can be like those people who were surrounded by Daniel. We can feel something. Yes, we can feel something. Because deep, our souls do see it. Our physical bodies and our physical manifestation of our souls may not be able to fully appreciate it. So, number one, you have to understand that we do, to some extent, sense it, but at the same time, we don't fully sense it. Just as those people surrounding Daniel did not see God. People say, why don't we see God? It's not an issue of God. It's an issue with our eyes, right? It's not God's issue. It's our eyes' issue. God is everywhere. Our eyes have issues seeing God, just as we're radio waves. Well, your ears have trouble picking up radio waves, but radio waves are all around you. God is all around you, but God has made it in such a way that we do not sense him everywhere. He did that purposely, but we can to some extent sense him, just as those people surrounding Daniel saw it. So let's read this commentary here. God arranged the universe in such a fashion that you remain unaware of the great influx of light to your soul during Torah study. It is only sensed subconsciously by your mazel, your higher self. That's by the way, when you tell someone mazel tov, that's one of the deeper meanings. You should have a good mazel. The mazel in the Kabbalists actually refer to the deeper part of your soul that is above your body, outside of your body, that drips into your body. So when you wish mazel tov, you're wishing them that their mazel, their higher soul should drip some goodness into them. Anyways, just putting that out there. Most people don't know there's another concept of mazel. It doesn't mean just good luck. We're actually referring to the deeper element of your soul that is not manifest in your body.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes.
In the middle of everything?
Yeah.
Did I just hear that we don't sense God's presence in our lives on a moment-to-moment basis?
We do not sense the full extent of God's presence.
Okay.
You can, just like, but that's the example of Daniel. The people sensed, but they did not have the vision that Daniel had, which means they did not have the full sense, right?
Got it.
So similarly, we can, yes, sense God in our lives and around us, but if we had the full disclosure, we would cease to be us. So we don't get the full sense of what's actually going on. If we did, I don't think any of us would ever make the wrong choices. Ever.
Man,
Huh? What?
I said amen to that. Yes, if we felt it
Exactly.
completely, we would be already it's Gan Eden.
Yeah.
Already, Mashiach.
Well, what we're explaining here would be higher than the Garden of Eden. If you would
Sure.
say. So he adds over here what I was just saying a moment ago. It is precisely because you don't see it, you're able to withstand it. If you were conscious of receiving an incompatible and overwhelming light, you would not survive the experience, which is not the case in the upper worlds. That's why the upper worlds, they actually do not get as much powerful Torah as we get down here. That's why the Torah that's here is more powerful than there. They can't actually handle. They can't handle the Torah as we have it down here. They would cease to exist. I wanted to say, what was I going to say about not seeing? I was going to say something. If you were conscious of receiving the incompatible and overwhelming light, we would not survive the experience. I had something to say on that, but I don't remember. That's something important. I guess it wasn't that important. I don't know. So to summarize what we did today, was we helped you understand another layer of the Torah. Is that not only is the Torah as we started last week and continue this week, the ability to become one not only with God's desire, but with his. Sorry, what were the words? Nina wrote it well earlier. Not only mitzvot, which are pleasing God, but through Torah study we can think like God, and there's a unity that we get with God that is greater than even doing His will. Because when I do someone's will, yes, I'm connected with them, but we're still separate entities. There's me doing the person's will. When I study Torah, I'm actually like, to an extent, as close as I can get because I'm thinking like them. And I spoke about the concept that when we think like God, it changes our perspective on the world around us. I gave the example of the two Odessas, the way we look at the world around us. And then we added on to that another beautiful benefit of Torah study is that through Torah study allows us to connect with the divine energy that never experienced any disclosure, any hiddenness of God. The Torah never hid God. So you might say, so why don't I feel it? It's your problem that you don't feel it. But it itself never hid God at all. The Torah never hid God. There's no hiddenness of God in the Torah. And so there's a beautiful unity that you're getting with God because you're getting God in a pristine form. You don't fully understand what you're getting. That's why you can survive it. But that is indeed what you're getting. You are getting full disclosure of God's will. And in fact, that full disclosure can only be experienced here on this earth because in heaven, that full disclosure doesn't happen. In heaven, that full disclosure doesn't happen because they would not be able to handle it. So what you've learned today is that, again, another special thing about this world. Till now, you always knew that God's light is hidden and therefore free will can only apply. I'll be done. I'll be out there in 2 minutes. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay, I'll be out there in 2 minutes. So till now, we all know that God being hidden in this world allows us free will. Now we are learning that in addition to that, God's divine presence being hidden from us allows us to connect with God through the Torah in ways that cannot be done anywhere else. And so for many reasons, when you see the darkness and you don't see God in the world around you, just know that that's a very special thing. It says when Mashiach comes, it says we're gonna beg God. We're gonna say, God, I wish only we were in the times of exile again, when we didn't see you, when there was a certain beauty in that. But I do want to say when Mashiach comes, I believe we will be able to sense God and survive. That's really what the pinnacle of all what we're working towards. We're working towards, through our Torah study now, we will enable ourselves that when Mashiach comes, God will be fully disclosed and we will be able to be ourselves. And that is something to pray for, and that is something beautiful. All right, so next week we'll talk about how Torah study is even greater than prayer. Till now we've said a Torah study is greater than mitzvos. Next week we will continue with how Torah study is even greater than prayer, and we'll end up with a crescendo about just how important Torah study is. And so hopefully in these chapters, again, you are gaining more reasons of why you should study Torah and the beauty in studying Torah. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day, a wonderful week. And I hope to see you next Tuesday. That's the plan as of now. Rosh Hashanah is not the Wednesday night. And may you all get through this storm easily and safely.
Thank you. You too. Yasha Koa.
Thank you. Thank you.